Okay, I think we should start. I think people will join as we go along. So it is my pleasure to introduce Ashwini Deshpande, who is professor at Ashoka University. And not only that, she's also founding director of Center for Economic Data and Analysis. And today she's going to talk about the impact of anti-poverty program in India on women's labor force participation. This is one of the biggest anti-poverty programs in the world. I think that's what Ashwini. So just before Ashwini starts, she's happy to take questions during the seminar. So please unmute if you have a question, but if not, then please keep your microphones muted. And as usual, the seminar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the GLO website by Monday at the latest, Monday next week. Right, with that, over to you, Ashwini.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining this GLO seminar today. Thanks to the GLO network for inviting me to present. This is an absolutely new paper. It's a short paper, and my co-authors are actually attending the seminar today. There are Shantanu Khanna, who's at Northeastern University, and Daksh Walia, who's a student at Ashoka University. And they would also be happy to answer questions in the chat while I'm presenting. And this is a work in progress. In fact, there are a couple of results that we would be, on which we would welcome comments very much. And I'll come to that as I go along. This paper, as the chair mentioned, is about the impact of rural livelihoods program, the biggest in the world, which is targeted towards women, and the impact of that program on female labor force participation rate, on employment of rural women, and on the type of employment of women, those who are employed. And the motivation for this paper is very straightforward. Since 2004, India's female labor force participation rate has been declining from an already low level. And this, over the same period, and in fact from earlier, there's been a massive increase in women's enrollment in rural livelihoods programs. So you see these opposing trends of increasing participation in livelihoods activities through self-help groups, but a declining labor force participation rate of women. And incidentally, the decline in Indian female labor force participation rate has been driven by a decline in the participation rate of rural women. So in fact, the investigation that we are conducting is exactly appropriate, because urban female labor force participation rate has been consistently low, but has not registered a decline. So in fact, it is in the rural sector that the answer to the puzzle of the decline in female labor force participation rate lies. The program today officially is called the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana National Rural Livelihoods Mission. We'll call it NRLM for short. And the program officially started in 2011. And the model is to organize rural women, mobilize rural women and organize them into self-help groups. These are voluntary associations of women that are not kinship-based. And the idea is that you begin with small levels of, consumption smoothing, saving and lending, and then it goes on to becoming bigger to generate, bigger and more substantive livelihood activities. I mean, there's a whole mission and conception behind this program, and I'm happy to talk about it later or during Q&A. Now, the issue is that we need to remember, and that impacts on the data a little bit as well, which is that while this particular version that is under operation started in 2011, what it did was that the earlier self-help groups that were called a different name, all of those got subsumed under this program in 2011. So even though the official start date of this program is 2011, it's not as though SHGs or the rural livelihood activities were at zero and then they started, then there was a totally new program that started in 11. Actually, what happened in 11 was just a consolidation of various other programs that had been going on, and that being given a new name, plus a renewed thrust of expansion. So that shows up a little bit in the data as well. Over the period since 2011, and assuming the sort of subsuming of the earlier programs, more than 74 million women have been mobilized under this program, which is greater than the combined population of Australia and Canada together. So it's a huge program, and it's absolutely correct that this is probably the biggest livelihoods and anti-poverty program anywhere in the world, targeted towards women and driven by women. Now, as I mentioned before, the groups that women join are groups of women that who did not know each other earlier. So these are women from different families from the same village. These groups are not kinship-based. They are not always caste-based either, although there are groups that sort of target or have as its members women mostly from the same caste group, not necessarily the same caste. So what it demonstrates is that women are willing to join initiatives to boost their individual livelihoods or their families' livelihoods. But the registered labor force participation rate is showing a decline. And that there is a mismatch in these two sort of tendencies. And so what we wanted to just investigate in this paper is just one simple question, which is, what has been the impact of women's participation in self-help groups under the NRLM program on labor force participation rate and on employment?
Ashwini?
Yes.
It's Ira. Quick question. So this program is not an employment program?
Not, it's livelihoods. The focus of the program is livelihoods. And there are other kinds of sort of social objectives of the program. So for example, intervening in getting entitlements. So, getting your public ration, etc. Now, boosting employment per se is not the focus of the program, although livelihoods is loosely defined. So it could increase employment as well. But wage employment, boosting wage employment is not a direct focus of the program. But what we want to see is what happened. How did this program?
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
I just was.
Yeah. But it's not a. So basically, the idea actually is to promote self-employment and eventually entrepreneurship. So the transition from self-employment and entrepreneurship also is a matter of scale. And there are other places where I've talked about that, but not in this particular paper. But it's really to boost self-employment, eventually to boost female entrepreneurship. And the grand target is elimination of rural poverty. So it's a sort of grand vision. In fact, the particular society that runs this program in one state of India, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, it used to be one state earlier, it's called the Society for the Elimination of Rural Poverty. So it actually takes that grandest objective into its name already, so that's really what the program is about.
Ashwini, yes. I've also a quick question
Yes.
of understanding. So these self-help groups, is this related to what I learned vaguely when I was visiting India, that there are unions, female unions, to organize self-employment. Is this not related?
No. That I think you might be referring to an initiative called SEWA, Self-Employed Women's Association. Those are trade unions. So what they have done is that they've organized informal workers and self-employed people like, shopkeepers or sellers of, vegetables, etc. They've organized them into unions to advocate for better conditions.
And these were entirely also females. What I have in mind was a female self-employment organization.
Yes.
Is this what it is? No, so this is not what you're doing here. Okay.
SEWA is a private organization. Private as in run by civil society. It's in the non-governmental organization, and it does exactly what you mentioned. These are groups that are run by the Ministry of Rural Development, and the objectives of these groups are manifold. But the primary objective is women's economic empowerment through boosting their livelihoods. So if I had to sum it up in one sentence, that's what it is. But this program is getting bigger and bigger, and almost virtually all socioeconomic problems are being now brought under its remit. And I've written about the impact, the difficulty that it imposes on member women, because now you have to do so much more than just sort of boosting your livelihood. Anyway, that is for another time. But let's just focus on the stated objective for that. But that's SEVA, what you're referring to. So what we look at labor force participation rate, employment rate, and type of employment, which is it regular wage and salaried employment, casual labor employment, etc., or self-employment. For that, we use household survey data conducted by the National Sample Survey. Now, until 2011 and 12, there used to be these 5-yearly rounds that were called employment unemployment surveys. And those who are familiar with Indian data know about these surveys. And the last of those was in 2011 and 12. There was one in 17-18, but at that, it didn't get released for various reasons. Now, what the government has moved towards, the statistical ministry, is to do these surveys annually for rural and quarterly for urban. And now they are called periodic labor force surveys. So the data that we have is the NSS Employment Unemployment Survey for 2011-12 and the periodic labor force surveys for 17-18, 18-19, and 19-20. So there's a big gap between 11-12 and 17-18, but that's not of our choosing. That's just because there wasn't any national level data available on employment situation and the employment status of Indians in between these two time periods. Now, on self-help groups enrollment, the data is at the district level. So the Ministry of Rural Development tells you what proportion of households are what they call SHG households, which means at least one woman in the household being a member of a self-help group run by the National Rural Livelihoods Mission. So what we've done is we've taken the total number of rural households in that district from the census, it's from the NSS, right? So we've looked at the NSS 2011-12 as the total number of rural households. Now we don't have in between, but we have, there's a methodology that allows you to do the share of households that are, that have at least one SHG member. So when we say an SHG household, it's a household in which at least one woman is an SHG member in that district. So the information on self-help groups membership is at the district level, whereas the employment is an individual characteristic that we are getting from the household survey data. And we get state domestic product data from the Reserve Bank of India's handbook of statistics. So these are, are the variables that we use in our analysis. The population that we are looking at is the population of rural women in the working age group, 15 to 60. And it's based upon what I've already explained, our final sample consists of 321,919 rural adult women surveyed over 4 years. Now, again, those who are familiar with Indian data know that this is not a panel data set. It's not the same women that get, or same individuals that get sampled. So these are repeated cross sections, but because the number of households in the cross sections is very large, even the repeated cross sections gives a fairly good idea of sort of changes over time in India. And of course, we are focusing only on the rural sector. This is, we analyze data over the 606 districts for which we have data on SHG membership from the Ministry of Rural Development website, from the NRLM website. As I said earlier, the choice of survey years is not ours. It's just the years for which the data was available. And that's to do with the National Statistical Agency, not our choice at all. And all the estimates that we present are weighted using sampling weights from given in the NSS surveys. This is what our summary statistics look like. So the first panel is about the coverage of the self-help groups, mobilization of households under the SHGs. And the low numbers for 2011, as I mentioned earlier, is not to be to be understood in the context, which is it wasn't as though there was hardly any mobilization at 2011. In 2011, the program just got launched, and that year was the year in which earlier programs got subsumed under it. So it's really from 12 and 13 on the Ministry of Rural Development website that you start seeing the numbers, because they're still collating numbers from different programs. And so we see the average number of SHG households really from the 17, 18, and 19. And so you see that it rises from about 18.9% to 24.7% to finally about 30% in 2019. The median is 10.8, 17, and 23.5. Now, we'll explain later on that we use the sort of a continuous increase in SHG membership, but we also use what we are calling the binary treatment variable. So what we were interested in seeing is there a threshold that needs, is there a threshold effect, which is that is there a threshold which, if a district crosses that threshold, do we start to see positive effects on our outcome variables of labor force participation rate, employment type, etc. And we played around with different thresholds, and we could look at a 20% threshold, a 33% threshold, and we even looked at a 50% threshold. And what we find actually is that when districts cross the 33% threshold, which means that when there are at least 33% households in that district with at least one SHG member, we start to see positive effects on LFP and on employment, as I'll show in a little while. We've done this analysis also with 50%, but then the districts where the membership is 50% or more are smaller, and so our sample size becomes smaller. And so you see, for example, here in this, a steady increase in the number of districts that had 33% SHG coverage. So you see 241 out of 606 districts by 2019 had 33% SHG coverage. This is the number of districts. The number of districts keeps changing in India because districts often come together and merge into a single district, but they also split. So it's a dynamic, denominator basically. And so by 2019, you see roughly about 40% districts in India with more than 33% NRLM SHG membership. Okay, panel B shows our outcome variables, and you see that in 2011, about female labor force participation rate in rural India was about 37.7%, close to 40%, and that fell to about 26% in 2017 and about 28%. Now you see here between 18 and 19, it appears that there is a jump, and it looks very optimistic until you actually you figure out what's going on here, and it turns out that there really wasn't much of a jump here. What these figures represent is women working as unpaid family labor in family enterprises being counted more as workers compared to earlier. So this 2019-20 survey also includes the first 2 months of the very strict lockdown in India, which was nearly complete, which other than agriculture, more or less every other economic activity came to a standstill. And that is a time when women really, agriculture was the sector of last refuge, both for men and women, but particularly for women. So this increase is spurious. It's not a real increase in female labor force participation rate in a way that we understand it. Proportion of employment, again, you see that increase getting reflected, but that's again this unpaid work that shows up as employment, but not really paid employment. Unemployment really is not a big part of the story. So for women in developing countries in general, India again is no exception, that either women are employed or they declare themselves out of the labor force. Very few women openly declare themselves as unemployed in the sense that I don't have a job today, but I'm looking for work. So women typically just either are working, or they just say that no, they're not working, as in they're out of the labor force. So you see low levels of unemployment. So therefore, you see that employment rate, which is, if you look at employment as a proportion of the labor force, it's pretty, 98.3% of women are employed as a proportion of those in the labor force. So in the labor force but not working, part of female labor force is really, really tiny. Regular wage salary.
Just
Yes.
a question in between. Do you have some information about something what is called underemployment?
That shows up. So this is usual status, usual and principal status, which means which uses two criteria. One, which is majority time in the last year, and subsidiary status, which is a continuous period of 30 days in which you should have been working over the last year. Now, one of the things, and that goes a little bit into the female labor force participation debate, but one of the things that happened in India ever since 2004 is that while the proportion of women working for pay has not declined, but the number of continuous days that they're able to obtain work has declined. And they fail both the majority time criterion, because they're not working for the majority time of the year, but they also fail the subsidiary work criterion. So they don't get picked up as workers. And you see that in the daily status, which is this other private data set that's getting used a lot in India, and I've also used it for other papers. And you see that there, the rate of employment is far lower than NSS data sets. But that's because it's measuring, were you employed yesterday, right? Now, underemployment, as in if you can count the hours of work, that's a little bit difficult in Indian data, is because in NSS, they ask about half day. So did you work for the first 4 hours or the second 4 hours? So basically, if you work for 4 hours in the day, you're counted as having worked. Whereas what would be really nice if you could get the hours of worked, hours worked, so if you work 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and that would give a pretty good sense of underemployment of women, which because these are broad time cuts, we don't get a sense of. But there are other ways of gauging underemployment, by juxtaposing usual and principal status with daily and weekly status. So you can get a sense of that as well. We haven't done that in this paper, but it's possible to do that. So wage employment, as you can see here, I would really focus on these 3 years. It's really not a big part of what women do in rural India, because there are very few wage jobs, regular wage jobs that are available in general, but particularly for women. You could be a primary worker in the primary healthcare center, you could be a teacher, etc. There are just very, very few kinds of opportunities for regular wage or salary employment in rural India for women. Self-employment covers pretty much everything, including farming. And that you see is is a big part of the story of what women do. And casual labor is the other big part of the story of what women do, which is they might work on construction, in a local small factory, or, sticking, the bindi that, for example, I'm wearing, somebody is sitting and sticking them on these pieces of paper, etc., things like that. So casual labor is the other part of the story. So that's really what women do. Okay. Now, the empirical strategy is simple and straightforward. It's a two-way fixed effects model with year and district fixed effects. And as I said earlier, we have both a continuous estimation where you just count the number of SHGs increasing over time. But we can also look at a binary treatment, which takes the value 1 for a district when proportion of rural households that have at least one SHG member crosses 33%. So we have that as well. And this is our estimation equation for the two-way fixed effects, where yi dt is the outcome variable for individual I in district D for the year T. And the outcomes are, is the individual in the labor force, that's labor force participation rate, is the person employed, and what is the type of employment? So we focus on 3, regular wage salaried, self-employed, and casual labor. Then we have the district fixed effects, the time fixed effects. And SHG dt is whether, so this is a binary variable, whether the SHG members are, whether the district has 33% SHG members or not. And this is just a controlling for state domestic product, just sort of a proxy for economic activity. And in the binary treatment, theta is our variable of interest. And here are the results, both for the binary and for the continuous estimation. And we see here that in this story, both the binary and the continuous are, are strongly significant explanations for so an increase in SHG membership has a strong. Yes.
Sorry, Ashwini. So when you look at the binary, was it like a linear probability model, or is it a
Yes, a linear probability model. It's a linear probability model.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so both, the continuous, which is just for robustness, and this is the binary treatment, we control for SDP, district, and year fixed effects, etc. And what you see, what this table indicates is that there's a strong positive relationship between rural female labor force participation rate and SHG membership, significant at the 1% level. On average, using the binary treatment coefficient, having over 33% of households with an SHG member in a district is associated with a 3.7 percentage point increase in female labor force participation rate. And on a base of 37.7% in 2011, this is roughly about 10% increase. So it's a significant increase that is associated with SHG membership. And if you can, we can interpret the coefficient on the continuous treatment as well, which what it tells us is that a 10 percentage point increase in the share of households with an SHG member in a given district is associated with a 0.8% percentage point increase in female labor force participation rate. So it's about 2% over the 2011 baseline. So both of these estimations are showing a positive impact, but there is something to be said for threshold effect, or what they call the critical mass in political science literature. So when you have a mobilization or a concentration of SHGs which exceeds 33%, then there are effects that we start to see in terms of female labor force participation rates. Now, we also looked at employment type, the same estimation, which is now run for employment type. So what are the outcome variables we looked at? One is employment rate, which is just employment as a proportion of labor force participation rate, which we saw was about 98%. It doesn't, so we see no difference in impact on employment rate, but we do see sort of a shift in the type of employment. So what it seems like it's happening is that a greater concentration of SHGs is shifting women's work away from regular wage salaried to self-employment. So these three coefficients add to zero because it's within employed. This is, so this is within the proportion of women, within women who are employed. And so how do we interpret this, which is that conditional on being on LFP. So we see an extensive margin effect, which was the first table that I showed you, but conditional on being in the labor force, the employment to labor force ratio is not impacted by SHG membership in a district. So these are not the same women, it's just an effect in the district that we are seeing. SHG membership is strongly positively associated with share of women who are self-employed, and negatively associated with share of women who are regular wage salaried workers, which is sort of the mandate of the SHG program as well. The whole point about having the rural self-help groups is to boost female self-employment. And it seems to be that when you have a concentration of SHGs that crosses 33%, you do start to see those effects in a district. Again, not to say that these particular women are showing that that effect, but it's overall in the district. The estimates for the continuous treatment are less precise, but the direction is consistent in terms of effects. Okay. Now we tried another method, which is, given that now we see that the 33% threshold is important, what if we think of the time when the district acquires 33% concentration? Supposing we think of that in an event study framework. So you take the time when the district reaches 33% as zero. And so you do leads and lags from that point, and you think of this as an event study estimate, right? If you did that, then you would basically estimate an equation such as equation 2, where the outcome variables are the same as before, right? L leads going from -L to -1. And there are, sorry, this should be, this is a typo. So there are, the lead is going from 0 to M, okay? And the lags are going from -L to -1, and 0 is the time period in which the district crosses 33% concentration. And the outcomes are the same as what we do before. And SAGDT is the variable when the proportion of districts, when the proportion of households in the district crosses 33%. Okay, SDP is the same as before. And so we do a kind of an event study analysis, and standard errors are now clustered at the district level to account for the district level heterogeneity. Now, when we do this, we come up with a slightly different result on which I am looking for comments from all of you here, which is that when you do this, this is the graph for LFPR. And here you actually see that there is nothing really, that you see that there's a sort of an upward trend all along, and it sort of continues. So you don't actually see you see differential pretense here, that districts that cross the 33% threshold, but actually doing better than the other districts already. Now, is this an artifact of data? Because we can only go back to 2011 when it was really not 0, but it was really sort of picking up districts, sort of consolidating data on districts that had SHGs underlying, but that was just not showing up in the data in 2011 or not. So we do, I mean, here the effect that you see is more or less, it's a sort of, you see differential pretense and you don't see anything dramatic after the 33% effect. Is this an artifact of data? What's going on? Or it's just differential pretense that those districts were different already. And that's what you see eventually also after 33%. But, and these are estimates for, sorry, why did I mute this? These are estimates for the employment population ratio. Same thing. But our earlier estimates on a shift away from regular wage salaried and towards self-employment, we see that again also in the event study. So we do see a decline in the share of women who are regular wage salaried workers. And we see an increase in the share of women who are self-employed. So these two effects sort of, hold even in the event studies framework, but not the FLFP result. And here is the effect on casual labor. Again, you see that there's nothing, there's no significance here. So it's really these two effects, which is self-employment and regular wage salary. This is what you see in the event studies framework, which is a little bit different from our DID estimation, which shows impact on female labor force participation rates as well. So I'll just, make some few points by way of discussion and then, invite sort of comments and suggestions about how we can move forward from here. Which is that in India, the fact that declining female labor force, the female labor force participation rate is declining from an already low level is counterintuitive. Why? Because fertility rates in India are declining. Female education is improving. Maternal mortality has sharply declined over the period that FLFP has declined. So all the preconditions that elsewhere in the world have seen a rise in female labor force participation rate, in India, we don't see that. Right. And now, of course, there's, multilateral agencies are concerned for instrumental reasons also, forget about reasons for gender equality, which is that there is the greater the number of women that stay out of paid work, there is that much GDP foregone due to absence of women in paid work. So whether we care about this problem for reasons of gender equality, or we care about this problem for instrumental reasons, the declining female labor force participation rate is an issue that we need to pay attention to. Now, the most favorite explanation today that dominates multilateral agencies, a great deal of economic research as well, which is that it's restrictive cultural norms that explain this. And there the papers are a little bit fuzzy about the level versus the decline effect. It sort of seems to explain everything. But I think we need to make a distinction between explanations for the low level versus explanation for the decline, which has been more recent. The low level has been a feature of female labor force participation rate ever since independence. And indeed, there are aspects of cultural norms in India that restrict women's participation in paid work. So for example, the disproportionate burden of women that women face of doing domestic work. And that doesn't only mean childcare, it means cooking, cleaning dishes, washing clothes, cleaning the household, maintenance. And these are jobs that get done in South Asia every day and several times a day. And it's either women have to do it themselves or they have to get it done. So either way, it's a women's responsibility. And the gender gaps in paid work outside the home are mirrored in the gender gaps in all of this, a very heavy burden of domestic work inside the home. So the more women are trapped in domestic work, the less they are able to take advantage of opportunities outside. However, there's a larger problem of what commentators call jobless growth, which is there is a employment crisis in India right now, not just for women, but for everybody. And where jobs are generation of jobs is not keeping pace with the growth in the working age population, and women are getting disproportionately impacted by this scenario. However, this cultural norms, coming back to the cultural norm story, to my mind, this cultural norm, which is very, very strong and dominant, explains the low level. It doesn't explain the decline, because there's absolutely no evidence to show that all of these factors worsened after 2011 and only in rural India. We don't have evidence of that. So the decline is, to my mind, cannot be explained by cultural factors. So, okay, I'll skip this part about the level, which is, a lot is got to do with counting, etc. If there are questions on it, I'm happy to talk about it. Now, coming back to the issue of decline and the availability of opportunities, there is work that I have done in a paper with panel data. There's work by Nicholas Lee, who's looked at the time use survey data. And what I find in my other paper with panel data is that women enter and exit paid employment several times during short intervals of 4 months. So they work when work is available, but that work is very, very fractured. And often they don't get counted as workers in, the point that I'd made earlier in response to Klaus's question. And what Nicholas Lee finds comparing time use survey data for 1998 with 2019 is that proportion of Indian women in paid work has not declined, but the hours they get for paid work has declined. And that shows up as a decline in female labor force participation rates because of the way in which women's work is counted. But over this same period, women's mobilization in rural livelihood programs has increased. And Shantanu Khanna, who's my co-author on this paper, he and I have another paper where we've looked at the impact on women's empowerment of being a member of a self-help group. And we are not the only ones to have looked at it. There's a huge literature in India that shows the very significant and positive impact of self-help group membership on women's empowerment measures. So the sheer scale of mobilization of women into this program and the impact on the positive impact on empowerment doesn't quite support the restrictive cultural norms theory in terms of explaining the decline in female labor force participation rate. And indeed, what we find here is that the SHG mobilization in SHGs and is not running counter to the female labor force participation story, because in districts where the concentration of SHGs crosses 33%, in fact, those are the districts that do better also in terms of female labor force participation rates, controlling for overall activity levels through SDP, etc. Okay, so overall, we would say, we need to pay attention to both. And we also put a question mark on some of the predominant explanations. But our the point where we've reached so far in the paper, we feel that it's really the reason that the event study estimation is not showing up so strongly for the FLFP result is that there were pre-trends from earlier. Now, are those pre-trends an artifact of data, or are genuinely the districts different that they were able to support eventually 33% SHG concentration? That's a question that we need to investigate. But what we do find is that SHG concentration about 33% definitely shifted women's work from regular wage salary to self-employment, which is in fact the objective of the rural SHG program. Did it increase labor force participation rate? Well, our two results are not quite fully consistent in that. And we've, at the moment, that's where we've stopped in this paper. And we were looking forward to presenting it today because we would like, your comments, your questions, and your suggestions about how we can proceed further and sort of consolidate the results that we have in this paper. It's a simple, short story, but we feel that it tells us something about the Indian female labor force participation rate decline puzzle. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ashwini. Questions? Ira, you had one in the chat.
Sure, just what's happening with rural household income in this decade? Because
okay.
Right, if household income is rising, the cultural norm may not be changing, but it may be that women who are working can choose not to work, or somebody can choose for them, but that could result also.
Yeah, so the income effect story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a story in the US in the 30s, 40s, 1950s. Yeah.
Right. So one is that from NSS, we don't get data on rural incomes because they don't collect data on incomes, but we've looked at incomes, not for this paper, but I've looked at rural incomes in the other paper that I've looked where I have a panel of women. And we do find that the probability of women to be in paid employment decreases when there's an additional male member employed, and increases when the number of male members employed decreases by 1. So there is a marginal effect. But we've done some, size calculations in that study, and we don't find that overall the story of family incomes rising or decline, rising as a pulling women out of the labor force, or falling as pushing women into the labor force. So the switches that we observe in rural India are not explained by, to a very large extent, are not explained by changes in family incomes. And overall rural incomes have not risen substantially at all, actually. I mean, farming incomes, there's argument about the data because people find the income data not very accurate. And India doesn't actually, to be honest, have very good rural income data. But there are stories of farming distress, farmer distress. People have analyzed farmer suicides, etc. So that's another huge part of the argument. But it's hard to believe that it's the income effect because take the neighboring Bangladesh, for example. Over the period when India's female labor force participation rate declined, Bangladesh's female labor force participation rate was continuously increasing. And if it were the income effect, that should have shown up in Bangladesh far sooner because of employment in both in livestock, self-employment in livestock at home, as well as employment in factories. And both of these have been big drivers of female labor force participation rates in Bangladesh. So we don't see that. But I can't directly bring income here because we don't have rural income data here for, that matches this estimation. But that's a great point. It'll be good to discuss that in the discussion part. Yes.
Almas and then Fani.
Thank you. I have a related question. One is like 15 years old is not woman. Probably over time, we have increased the upper threshold or lower threshold to separate girls and women. If they have increased the age, then of course it changes the share which participate in work. Then the second one is agriculture.
Sorry, I didn't understand what threshold?
15 years versus 18 years. You talk about women and 15 years. If there is a tendency to treat the lower threshold 18, it will change the share which participates in the labor force.
We can check that how that
Probably. The second one is agricultural. We talk about agriculture and rural area. The food prices has doubled and tripled. That affects the income of the household. Whether that's one and full or part-time, I didn't hear exactly if you treat full-time and part-time or any mixture of them. This has led to decline in working outside agriculture. So the food prices plus this threshold of age.
No, so we can do a robustness looking instead of 15 to 50. 15 is taken very commonly in India as sort of the start of the working age, but we can look at 18 also, and it's not a problem to run that. My gut sense is that nothing much will change, but we are happy to look at that. In terms of food prices, I didn't fully understand. You are saying that
agricultural product prices has gone up a lot recent years, and that influences the families, as Ira mentioned, also might have negative effect on the labor force participation, at least not full-time, because I didn't hear you talk about whether you define participation as full-time or part-time.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's an income effect question again. And there is no way to integrate. India doesn't have data on incomes of individuals or households, because in agriculture or in informal work, it's very hard for people to distinguish between expenditures that they do. For example, I'll give you an example, concrete example, which is supposing it's a farming family and the farm hands are eating in the landlord's house, for example, right? So food will get cooked for the family and also for the farm hands. Now, the cost of the food that goes into the farm hands technically is a cost of production, whereas the rest of the food that the family is eating is, domestic consumption, etc. But it's very, very hard in developing countries for families to maintain these separate accounts. And so to get your income just on the family enterprise, whether it's farming or any other, artisanal activity or whatever, is harder. So to bring income into the estimation will really be difficult. But what we can do is we can provide a discussion on farming incomes and what, that will be a proxy, because we don't really have data. Now, on the one hand, if you look at the minimum support price that the government has been giving to farmers on certain crops, that has increased for sure. But there are crops that are outside the minimum support program of the government, and the prices of inputs have also increased. So we'll have to, one will have to do a little bit of a greater discussion. But I take the point that we must explicitly discuss the income effect, for which I don't believe there's support from just based upon my work in the other paper.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Fani?
Yeah, thank you so much, Madhu. Sorry, my video is not working, and so the best thing is I can talk to you. So looking at that 33% as the benchmark, I mean, did you do any robust checks by changing 33% to 25?
So
I mean,
we did. We looked at 20, 33, and 50, right? Shantanu and Dutch?
Right, yeah.
We did 3, right?
Yeah.
We also looked at 10%, right?
I don't think we did that.
We didn't do that. Okay. So we did 20, 33, and 50, these 3.
and then the story was more or less the same?
Well, at 20, you don't see hardly any effect. So it's really 33 when the effect kicks in. 50, of course, the effects are stronger, but the number of districts that have more than 50% concentration is smaller. So the sample size goes down a lot. So while since we do see effects at 33, we thought that it would be good to take 33 as the point where the effect kicks in.
Okay.
As you go up from 33, the effect stays.
Okay. So what I was thinking is it conceivable that some of the programs Prime Minister Modi instituted in terms of whatever rural programs, so forth and so on, is anywhere that picked up in your data? I mean, I don't know what kind of controls you had when you were showing the results. I mean, like my understanding is he tried very, very hard to come up with a lot of rural programs to you know what I mean? So we read about it quite a bit in Economist and other places. So I was wondering, is there anything to it?
No, we don't control for participation in any other program. This particular program, by the way, and I've written elsewhere a lot about this particular program. What is amazing about this is that it has survived all governments and all changes in regime. So this was started, the earlier versions of this program go way back. This particular version goes back to 2011. And when Prime Minister Modi, when the government changed in 2014, and again in 2019, they got re-elected, this program did not change. So it's a program that seems to get support from all political persuasions. So I would hesitate to put sort of a political explanation behind this program because it survived for years, and obviously it has positive effects. And so governments invest a lot in it. In terms of other rural programs that Prime Minister Modi and his government have started, I don't fully understand how that would play a role in our story, because we are looking really in mobilization in SHGs that we can see very clearly has been continuously increasing. And the FLFP that in a recorded sense has been falling.
So maybe your fixed effects, whatever, might pick up some of this noise. I mean,
fixed effects are picking up. And FLFP decline, by the way, was it last week? The Prime Minister was speaking at some event, and for the first time, the Prime Minister of India actually mentioned the problem of female labor force participation rate as an important economic problem. So that's good, because I think India is losing out a huge amount in terms of just even if gender equality was not a concern, which to me it is very much. So I would look at this problem from the perspective of gender equality, but even from an instrumental perspective of foregone GDP. The problem that women are not in paid labor force is an issue, and the Prime Minister did mention it last week in one of his speeches. Yeah. But I don't, I don't think we can, there's evidence of any one particular program that the government has done and that's sort of picked up. No,
I quite agree with you. So, but one thing about your data is you have all these repeated cross sections, whatever those four years you showed us. There's no way you can, there are no people who participated in all those 4 surveys by any chance to string them together?
Even if they were, we don't know that. I mean,
okay, you don't know.
The thing is, and that's what NSS is. It is not longitudinal data. Okay, but the thing is, the data sizes are so large, sample sizes are so large. So even the analysis of repeated cross sections does tell you something about what's going on over a time.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. As a labor economist, I agree with you. Yeah. And then one final thing which I want to say, because I have to leave, is that I did a paper on a link between fertility rates and labor force participation rate in Europe, and I'll send you a link to that particular paper. I mean, like I got to run here, and then maybe you can look at what we found, the link between fertility and the labor force participation rate.
That will be fantastic. Thank you so much.
And I'll drop you a line. Okay, I'm so sorry that I couldn't connect with you face to face.
Thank you,
Fani. Thank you.
Thank you, Fani.
Yes.
There are some questions in the chat, but I think Daksh is dealing with it, so I think we should be
Daksh and Shantanu also, I see. I haven't even read it.
I think but they're replying to that, so I won't go to those. Hopefully, those are being addressed. Klaus and then Elmas, and then we should stop after that.
Just another quick question. A lot of things may have to do with measurement challenges here. Now you're saying, and this was known to me, that the share of women in paid, at least in hours in paid work, is declining, as we see it also on the slide here. Now, what is happening with men? Hours in paid work, is it also declining?
Yeah, it's also declined, but less than for women.
Yeah, but this might be a general trend, because you see, Danny Plenschlauer runs around, writes books about the issue, is that we no longer see the effects in just work or not work. Unemployment may not go up, but the invisible unemployment. That's why my question came before. So okay. So this may explain that there is a general trend that hours in paid work goes down, and we see lots of disguised unemployment.
Yeah. No, definitely, because I have that graph in the other paper. I don't have it in this one, where if you plot the growth in working age population, and if you plot the growth in employment from about 2004, you see this divergence clearly. So there is a problem of, and you see that India has been having quite a few protests related to employment, etc. So it's an overall problem affecting men and women both. But the argument that the literature and elsewhere I've also made in other papers is that when jobs are scarce, women get disproportionately more affected. And that's not, again, India is not unique in that respect. Many other countries in the world see the same pattern.
Yeah, that would be the story. Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, but I think that, I just thought of something that based on what Klaus said, which is, Ashwini, if we kind of believe that, that decline in employment for men, it exists, it might be a secular trend, but would it be related to our treatment? And so in some sense, you could study that as an outcome, as a placebo, not to say that it's a very clean one, because obviously who's working in the household can affect, the employment of other members, but it's an interesting idea I think we could pursue.
Yeah, definitely. Let's write that down, and thank you, Claude. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, last question, Almas.
Sorry to come back and ask another question. My question is related to rural area. Land is very important. I wonder if you control for land, which determines basically the decision of whether working like seasonally on the farm, or if no land, full-time looking for, round the year looking for job off farm. So that was controlling for land if you did that.
Whether these women belong to families that own land?
If they have land or not. If no land, then they aim at off farm, like a round the year work participation. If they have land, so there will be seasonal work at the farm, and then probably seasonal off farm.
But if they work on, because in India, it's also very common to work on other people's land, as agricultural labor. So if they're agricultural laborers, then they get classified as well, in most cases as casual labor.
Yes, but
so in our casual labor,
land ownership influences the paid and unpaid work.
Well, one of the problems with that is that because the treatment, which is SHG membership, is at the district level. It's not at the individual level.
Okay, so you need to share with land.
The thing is that what we are doing is we're just looking at proportion of households in a district where at least one woman is an SHG member, because the SHG data is only available, they don't give it at the individual level.
Yes, but
so we don't know whether women, from the household level data, we don't have information on whether any woman in a particular household is a member of an SHG.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Perfect timing now. We can stop. It's 2 o'clock. Thanks so much, Ashwini, for a very interesting presentation and a very interesting paper. And good thing that we had a lot of time for discussion as well. So that I hope it helped the paper and helped you in kind of finishing the rest of the 10% or 15%.
Everyone for questions. Shantanu and Daksh, I haven't read the chat at all, but I assume that if there's anything.
I think they both were addressing the questions. I think
for us to do later on.
Sure. If there are any further questions, they can email you. Okay, thanks very much, Ashwini. And
Thank you very
everyone,
much.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you,
answers,
everyone.
great
Bye.
Thanks,
discussion.
everyone.
see you all
Bye-bye.
hopefully
Bye.
next month. Bye.